Welcome to Total Network Operations, the project with a podcast dedicated to hardworking network operators like you who deliver all the packets. We drive conversations on great ideas in NetOps so you can make informed decisions for your network and your team, and to spur constructive dialogue between vendors, NetOps teams, and across the whole community. I'm your host, Scott Robon. On today's episode, I want to say hi from Boston, Mass, technically Somerville, Mass, or Somerville for the local pronunciation, for this special episode of Teen Ops on the Road. We have a little bit of a different setup for this episode. I have this weird, unique hobby of taking pics of manhole covers for telco, cable, and other comms infrastructure. It's hashtag RoboPipes on LinkedIn, somewhere on Instagram and Facebook. I started doing this when I was doing a lot of walking to lose weight. And I was probably looking down too much while I walked around, but it had this payoff of getting some really good documentation of comms infrastructure. As a networker, I'm fascinated by the physical infrastructure, the whole idea that the internet is built on, these pipes beneath our feet and beneath the streets. So it just made sense to start documenting it. I'm going to be putting more of a focus on physical infrastructure, call it broad shoulders networking or blue collar networking. It's an important perspective in a world that's full of abstraction, indirection, virtualization, and software eats the world. So this episode is the first of what I hope will be multiple that put attention on infrastructure. And to start this series, I have the pleasure of welcoming James Jun today. James wears at least two hats, and he's going to tell us about them and more. He's the IP Core Network Architect and Managing Director at TOWARDEX, and he's the Director of MassIX, the Massachusetts Internet Exchange. This combo of roles gives him a very holistic view of logical architecture and protocol mechanics of peering and internet exchange, as well as the iron and steel and glass of internet infrastructure that keep all the bits flowing. So James, welcome. Thanks for hosting me here today in one of your facilities at CoreSite here in Somerville, Mass. Did I get the intro right? Tell me your background. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for coming by. It's nice to meet you finally, and definitely glad to be here. So yes, you definitely got the introduction right. So how I got into networking was when I was in junior high, back when I was a kid. So I was in this school district called Acton-Boxborough in Massachusetts. And they're one of the nice schools. And they were one of the first school districts in Massachusetts to completely wire all of their classrooms with, initially started with Cat3, and then they moved on to Cat5. So
Cat3? Wow.
Yeah, this was when I was first exposed to it was 97, but I believe their first install was I think it was 95 or 96.
Okay.
So it obviously was already set by the time I got into the school, right? But it was fascinating because when I was a kid, you have all these computers, the school had a lot of Macintosh and all that. There's Ethernet jack in every.
No Wi-Fi.
No Wi-Fi back then. Yeah. But and it's just crazy seeing the ubiquitousness of this LAN being in next to every computer throughout the whole school, and it looks like a phone jack, a little bigger, right?
Right.
And it's connected to this always on, the
RJ11s don't fit in the RJ45, but
it looks similar, so it's a little fatter. Sure. You plug it in, you got the 10 base D, and then you can just. And school had this T1 line, back then T1 was a big pipe, right?
Exactly.
So and it just. It was crazy because at the time, my exposure to the internet at the time as a kid was on parents' computer. You get on AOL or use a modem. You always had to do this. We just got sign on. That's how the whole thing started, right?
Sure.
It was very convoluted. Not only was it slow, it was very convoluted process. You got to sign in, you got to sign out. It was like that. But then it was really fascinating how in any machine that's plugged into this jack. That's next to every computer. You just open up Netscape and there's internet. It's so fast. I was like, oh my God, this is great.
Yeah.
So that's how I was really, because, we're all nerdy at the end of the day. I think if we ask all of ourselves, right, in this industry, at the end of that, we are doing networking because we're all nerds.
Sure.
We start because we love computers. And then, when you start seeing the fact that computers, or back in the 70s and 80s, we used to call them terminals, right? Where they start interacting with each other over a network. I think network is the next evolution of where you move what piques your interest, right?
Sure.
And when I saw that in junior high, it really opened my eyes up because it really made me get fascinated about. It made me fall in love with the internet.
That's awesome.
Right there,
Sure.
not Apple Talk or any kind of enterprise that right from there.
Right.
It made me fall in love with TCP/IP, and I was like, wow. And then from there is where my networking career essentially began. And then I was very lucky and blessed from there. A couple 2 to 3 years later, I think it was like 2000, 2001-ish. 2001, I think. The school's ISP, was nice enough to hire me while I was still in high school, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah, initially it's like intern, summer intern kind of basis. So that really, obviously, every company has their ups and downs, no matter which, large, small. It really opened my eyes up in two different ways. Number one, it's the first time in someone's career or life, what have you, where you're seeing the business, how the sausage is made, the business aspect of, whether your drama from everything from customer support to billing, non-paying customers, and just office politics and everyone just hating on each other, or the usual.
Never happens.
Yeah.
You don't hate on each other.
Yeah, exactly. The usual dirty laundry of any company, right? You get to really see that, in full view as that type of people interaction is what's keeping the world connected. You really see a different side of not, from being an end user of a well-oiled machine called the internet to one of the businesses that's making it all happen. It was really fascinating to see.
Sure.
And I'm very grateful for the opportunity that they gave me, when I was only a kid.
What's the very first thing they had you do? Like, what was your first assignment?
The first thing, if I remember correctly, during the interview, so obviously, I started playing with Linux and, FreeBSD. I was a big FreeBSD fan. So they had me start working on just simple stuff like just, take tickets for DNS requests. And back in those days, the internet was a lot more fun back then. You didn't have the automation, this, software, this crap where like that nowadays, if you're going to networking, you might as well be a programmer nowadays. But back in those days, network was easy and was just more fun, right? It was more like it wasn't so much called DevOps. It's just like, well, I guess it is, but it was more like shell and sysadmin stuff, right?
You were stringing it all together. Like every circuit turn up was bespoke, was handmade, right?
Yep, exactly. And it was a lot more hands-on. Yeah, you're 100% right about that. It was there's a lot more like interaction, so to speak. Less abstraction, less layers, right? So in some ways, it scales less than where we are today. So, there's certainly value where we are today in a technology sense, but you can truly appreciate how the sausage is made back in the day. Sure. So I started just doing, handling those tickets, right? And then, as the time wore on for over the year, then, I kind of, they had my role expanded where they put me in front of the routers back with I think it was really fascinating when they had me work on their border routers, where we had this DS3 lines from Verizon. Back then, this wasn't Verizon. Today, when you think of Verizon, we think of a Usenet 701.
Internet at that point or something.
Well, it was Bell, exactly. It was Bell. They were actually just going through rebranding. They just started the Verizon brand around that time. I might have been it was around the middle. I don't know if it was 2000 or 2001. I think it was 2001, something like that, or maybe 2002. So anyway, this was before Verizon buying MCI. This wasn't AS701. This was Verizon GNI.net, right? that was a fun regional tier 2 network. It was pretty well engineered for what it was. It didn't have peering or anything, but they at least had a good selection of transit providers, right? So we had DS3 lines, multiple of them doing ECMP, and then when I started working with the network team on those circuits, now I was put on, having enabled on their border routers. It's the first time I touched a router that's not a Cisco 2600, right? That's bigger.
But still as an intern, right?
As an intern, yeah.
That's
I was in my senior year, right?
Yeah, awesome.
And it was really fascinating, nerdy experience for me. I really loved that. I still stay connected with those folks. It was a company called Merrimack Education Center, MEC. And those folks are, they've been acquired, and but the folks are still there, and they're really good people. They gave me opportunity in ways that really defined, what we do today.
So important to remember the people that give you those first opportunities.
We still stay in touch, I believe. Cool. It's been fantastic.
Did you hire on there eventually, or did you?
Eventually. So I think it's 2003. I wanted to, kind of get out into some more, different things, right? I wanted to do some consulting or kind of get out to the hosting or, do a little, kind of have a change of pace.
Sure.
So in 2003, I left to, kind of start doing some consulting work for other, people as I got. And usually, being fresh out of high school and being young, you try to find customers.
Sure.
So I started subbing in for one of the small IT integrators,
Okay.
right? So where I'm essentially, they just put me as like 1099 contractor, right? And then I
Sure.
just do a network for them, and that was fun. That opened me
Lots of different experience.
lots of different. Now we had, and I love my first job because for all the upsides and downsides of any workplace, right? You're working at a service provider.
Sure.
And as you know, as a lot of listeners in this podcast know, there's a huge disconnect and difference between service provider and enterprise.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So
different technologies.
it's a completely different world.
Yep.
Completely different world. Different, not only spending levels. So going from that to dealing with enterprise customers, it was a unique experience,
Sure.
so to speak. And they quickly started to get a little boring. Right. So.
I see. I'm seeing a theme here. Need to keep James' attention. Gotcha.
So then after that, I started selling a little bit of, I wanted to kind of like do things on my own, right?
Okay.
So started doing a bit of hosting out of data centers.
Okay.
So, I went to this data center in Waltham. I think it was called Switch and Data at the time.
Okay,
It
sure.
got acquired by Equinix. Now now that building's empty. Equinix closed down. They have a new data center now.
Okay.
Nearby. That's way nicer. So anyhow, we started doing that, and then fast forward, it was just off and on, just side gig here and there. Many years later, eventually around 2012 is when I finally decided to start TOWARDEX as a network provider. So I've seen, by that time, I really started seeing a lot of the, at that point, I've really fully moved on to the colo world,
Sure.
right? So I started interacting and dealing with a lot of customers that are coming to colocation. Back then, 2009 to mid 2010s was a heyday for colocation in Boston.
Sure.
I think it like that in everywhere, right? That was at a time where everyone was talking about cloud, but there was an inertia of people still staying with, their own environment, right? Nowadays, everyone is a cloud, and now there's some talk about, putting some of the workloads back now, which is great. But this was a heyday of colo. And Boston and New England is unique in that we have very high energy costs.
Okay.
So from a data center perspective. So we are a very, ill-equipped market right now in terms of enterprise colo.
Okay.
So the cloud has effectively destroyed colocation in New England. So there are still, believe me, there are still tons of enterprise colo in Boston, right? But when you compare us to, say, developing markets or big markets, like even places like Phoenix or whatever, it is a very sad place of what it used to be, right?
Interesting.
Because and I think that the cloud has kind of happened at a wrong time where the combination of the cloud and high energy costs kind of work against the data centers here in Boston. Because what happened is that once the energy costs started going up and everyone started moving out to cloud, and now people are talking about moving some of the workloads back to the data centers, right? But then they look at it like, well, since we already moved out now, does it really need to come back to where our office is anymore?
Sure.
Or why don't we just take the colo in Houston or Phoenix, right? It doesn't have to be in Boston anymore. So the return to the colo in Boston is, we are seeing some of that, and that's great. I always love that. I'm a huge fan of old school colo. I think that those were the fun times where everyone it's really about the ownership of the IT processes, right?
Okay.
And I think that the cloud today has a value in the ecosystem and the convenience that it provides. But 100% reliance has been, it's not been it's been quite boring.
So just to make sure I'm tracking with you, you mean like the use of SaaS products for everything primarily? And I don't have to install it on my servers. I don't need to have those servers in my building. It's just in the cloud somewhere. Okay.
Yeah, and that mentality for a while has really done, it hurt co-location in many, many places. I mean, you ask any data, they'll tell you that, but still there's a strong demand for co-location. Sure. It's only going up, right? And obviously Boston being a corner of the U.S. and having high energy costs kind of hurt the data centers even more. Right. But the great news is we're starting to see some of them come back even in this market now, which is great. So I think we're at a great time. But
you were telling me before we got started, you're keeping pretty busy. So you must be seeing reasonable activity.
We are seeing a lot more activity. Quite frankly, it's making me feel young again. So I like it.
That's awesome. Well, so let's we've got at least these two chunks of what you do.
So I apologize. I kind of got sidetracked.
No,
here.
It's all good.
Yeah. So by that time, I got fully entrenched in colos. So that was a moment where I saw an opportunity. Right. There was one company that everyone remembers called INAP or Internet.
Sure.
Right. So sadly they went through chapter 11, then chapter 22, chapter 33. We call those numbers, the first time you do chapter 11, it doesn't work out, so you do it again.
Right,
so,
right.
So,
get a redo.
Yeah, you do it again, man. So INAP's gone for all intents and purposes. But what they really do was they really invented this concept of blended bandwidth at colo, right?
Okay.
Where they'll take transit or upstream internet connectivity from all these different tier 1 or large tier 2 providers, mix it down, and then they had this proprietary assimilator or whatever they call it. And then they would sell this, what they call optimized, well-connected internet service to their customers. And, it was very popular amongst colo users, right? So over time, INAP kind of lost its way, just like, every company has their moments, right? And but the co-location demand kept going on. So what you have is, this different customers coming into this carrier-neutral data centers, like the one we're sitting in today, where they need blended bandwidth connectivity. So INAP provided this blended bandwidth solution in data centers, and they were obviously selling a lot of that in their own co-location providers.
Sure.
So naturally, a lot of data centers, like the carrier-neutral data centers, like the one we're sitting in here today, they, obviously INAP is also a competitor, right? So although they've been very good at working with each other, you can be competitors and still have good relationships, right? But there's a natural sales friction between salespeople, right? So that's where we saw an opportunity. Okay,
Sure.
Let's be an INAP competitor, come in, run, and this is where we really found our calling, is that now, we can really be our own service provider in ways that we wanted.
Sure.
And back then, Boston went through a couple stages in the internet infrastructure. So in the .com days, Boston was one of the most well-connected markets in the USA.
Sure.
If we dial the clock back 25 years from now, right? 25 years back, right?
We had the whole, tech corridor, Route 128.
Yep. And
you have so many universities.
Exactly.
Right?
And back in the days of Media One and all that. So if you just take random, DSL or 2 meg cable broadband that you bought, and you just run trace route, right? Most of the traffic is locally switched or locally routed here in Boston. So if you're going to, some of the connection, I think there was this is all bankrupt company names. So if you're doing trace route from, say, Media One to someone's Flashpoint DSL user,
sure,
you would stay in Waltham in Boston. It was really fascinating. It was the internet was really, Boston used to be very well connected.
Sure.
And then after the bandwidth market went to a total meltdown and disastrous meltdown, and then after all of that happened, it became a telecom nuclear winter, right? And then that's when the private equity started coming in. That's when the mergers and acquisitions, all this started. So you had a second generation of providers in the CLECs. We had some of the that created some of the best stories of Boston, like a Light Tower Fiber Network is one of them. But they also had their downsides. Is that this second generation of providers that came into Boston had no clue whatsoever on how to run IP networks. It is. Oh, well, maybe I'm sure I'm gonna be eating some of this back. I know there's really good people in Light Tower that are really great. I love them. I'm not talking anything bad about them.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
They're no longer with us. I mean, that the company got absorbed by Crown Castle by now. But the point being is that it's in their sense, they ran a good network on the IP, and they were a fantastic fiber network. But the problem was, I'm comparing to the old days of Boston, where we're, for all intents and purposes, we're practically a tier 1 market.
Sure.
We don't say everything was being back out to New York. And it wasn't just Light Tower, it was also Comcast, all the newcomers, every single one. New York City was literally default gateway for Boston. It was really bad. It was, there was no peering whatsoever up here. Right. And it was really sad to see. So in 2012, when we started TOWARDEX, Boston was still reeling from a lot of that. I always had this inkling that for our customers, we wanna fix this, provide the best connectivity that we can, that we can afford. And obviously, it's easier said than done. When no one does peering, you're just a small company. No one's gonna peer with you.
Sure.
So, but the easy way you can start is you can start buying transit.
Right.
That starts to get very expensive, as you know. But you start with what you can. So we're not entirely well connected, but we started being well connected in some of the locations that customers like a lot, right?
Sure.
Like whether it be, you want to, like Comcast is probably the first one to start with, or you start with local networks. And over time, we got really lucky in that we're able to build this rapport and relationships. This is the first time where I really felt the people relationships really matter, because us as networkers, we only think about turning up circuits, turning up BGP. Those are like one of the exciting moments in every day in our careers, right?
So be specific. Like, what kind of relationships are you talking about with people in the regulatory structure, with the individual companies?
Not even just basic.
All of it?
The peering coordinators, the product sales teams.
Sure.
Because a lot of times as a small company,
like carrier product sales teams.
Carrier product sales. So a lot of times as a small provider, you don't qualify for peering, right? So you're retail.
Sure.
You're for all intents and purposes, you're retail enterprise. But you also want to negotiate the best outcome for our own customers, right?
Sure.
So we're not gonna just go and buy a retail DIA from someone like Comcast.
Right.
Not only is the cost horrible, high cost means we're not negotiating the best value for our customers. We want to provide affordable rates and great connectivity for our users, right?
Sure.
So having right relationships on the sales side, the product management team, for them to understand our business better, so we're paying, but
be able to communicate it to
giving
them.
giving us access to the right folks within the organization, so that we get even though we may be paying you, we're treated almost like a settlement-free peer from an operations perspective. Sure. That is huge, right? Yeah. So in terms of escalations, troubleshooting, and even basic things like local pref, like we have some of the relationships where we're paid peer, right? But we're configured as settlement-free peer, right? Okay. So those kind of relationships just matter in that having the people communicate those needs and be able to advocate for you. So those matter. So and it really comes down to just get together, have fun. Get some beers, break bread, right?
Sure.
Just, that was really, and as a shy and introverted guy, it takes a long time to figure out how to even manage those kind of people relationships.
Shy and introverted, I don't buy that for a second. So. Well, maybe not anymore.
Maybe not anymore. Well, back in those days, it was difficult to transition out of that, right?
Sure.
There was an interesting lesson. As it continues, so the one of the biggest things, I think it was 2013, around that time, is that we were also able to get local peering with the Internet 2 Gigapop, that's Northern Crossroads. So they were run by Harvard, MIT, now it's run by MIT today. They're really good people, Brian Mullo, Chris O'Brien, the whole team. They keep a really great shop. And when we got the peering, that was fantastic, because all of our university-bound traffic on our network, it was hit or miss. We always had to go through. Sometimes you have to really pick and choose who their transit providers are.
Sure.
So most of the time we try to keep it in Boston. Sometimes we would go through New York. Having that direct peering eliminated all of those problems, and it was really fantastic to get. So by the time of early 2010s was really when we're really focusing on improving, having the best, cleanest looking trace routes, best adjacencies with other ASNs. That was really it was that time, and
So to follow on that, right? So that you obviously needed you had all the activity that got you into providing good peering and access for your customers. Mm-hmm. Was that the chicken and the egg was getting into the fiber and physical interconnect?
Okay. That's a great. That's a very great question. So it's interesting. Back in 2010s, we're just network engineers, and our customers loved it. We have some of our customers today who have been with us since we started over 10 years, and they've seen it all, right? And they're very loyal customers. We thank them, and they love what we do. They loved us back then. They still love us now, But back then, we had no idea about. I mean, obviously, fiber. You got the fiber jumper. We know basic things. Single mode,
you don't have to use light meter. There's jumpers between two racks.
But the most experience that we had, was fiber. Was looking at a patch panel facing the cross connect, right?
Just a little more to it than that.
There's a little more to it. So you got, the most interaction you have is a light meter. So it's like, and then we started, when we started, as we expanded our network footprint to other data centers, we started leasing dark fiber from carriers, from our carrier partners, right? So that's when we, and OTDR is kind of pricey.
If they would lease it to you.
So that's a great point that you mentioned. Initially, we had a very difficult time trying to get lease dark fiber. Everyone's like, SA, you're a competitor. Like, there was this one carrier that they told me that they lost $350 DIA deal to us, and I don't even know, because we're not really a sales-ish kind of company. People usually call us, so I don't I don't recall competing, or none of us did. So we're a little confused, but I understand their
It's
perspective.
an inbound call. You're going to take it.
Yeah. I mean, if it came from the end user, the customer's not going to, oh, I'm calling you because I hate this guy. Like we don't need to. That's none of our business. Sure. Our business is just to make the customer happy, right? So, but but I can understand where they're coming. I guess that one customer was moving away from it. We had no idea about it. And even if we did, if customers are looking for service, it's none of our business. We got to provide it, right? Yeah. So they got a little hurt by that. So, and when we called them for dark fiber, they said we're banned from buying any dark fiber. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I thought, so we at the time, so we had some of the struggles back then because as a provider that's expanding to these different data centers across Boston in the I-120 and the I-95 120 corridor. Yep. We needed dark fiber. Yeah, we're a power user of dark fiber. So we, the good news is there were some different competitors that are showing up. So we're always able to find competitors dark fiber where someone was always willing to sell us fiber, right? But it did also make things a little bit difficult when you are banned by the major fiber provider from buying any dark fiber. So we had to do some workarounds, but eventually we all made up. We have a very good relationship with the successor of that provider now. Cool. I'm glad that people came around, so that's good. But so we were lucky that despite the challenges, we were able to find access to dark fiber. But you are 100% right in that what we call getting assured access to fiber assets has always been a moving target. Sure. In Boston, especially as a small service provider.
Gotta be frustrating.
It could be frustrating, but it's one of those things that you just gotta navigate, and you don't always get the best price either, right? And an enterprise retail customer gets cheaper fiber than than we could get.
Really.
Just because we're marked down as a competitor, and in all fairness, I understand where they're coming from. I'm not complaining. Like, I understand why they would view that way. If I was them, I don't know if I would behave the same. I don't see the point of fighting with competitors. It's called the internet and telecom. So I don't see the point of that, but I can at least understand why they thought that the way they did, right? So
on the infrastructure side now, like one of the things that like I caught my eye with you is the stuff you put on LinkedIn, and you've got pictures down in manhole covers and conduit, and sometimes the weather conditions are not that great. I mean, we are in the Boston area. Winters are hard here. Yeah. What does that side of the business look like for you now? Like, you're glad you have great relationships and you can get dark fiber when you need it.
So let's get to that slowly, and I apologize for being sidetracked there.
Okay.
So at the time, we were very, we had no idea about fiber. The most experience we had was end users just plugging in and plug our router, plug our DWDM to, the cross-connect panel, right? So, and that as the time went on, as we became, by mid-2010s, right, we became probably arguably the most popular bandwidth provider in all of data centers in Eastern Massachusetts, right?
Kidding.
So everyone's calling. We by that time we were connected to all the different data centers, and as it happens, one of our data center partners who's been a fantastic partner, I believe over time they wanted to also get into getting to become their own IP provider.
Okay.
Right.
Sure.
And their move, unfortunately, was to say, "What a customer!" Right?
Yeah, they kick you out.
So they kicked us out, right? So that was a very eye-opening situation, and at the time, so I think this was 2018 when we got kicked out, and that was very distressing time for us. That was probably in the years we've been in business, that was probably the moment where we're at our closest to actually going out of business.
Yikes!
Imagine like if you are, say, in Equinix or some large ecosystem, right? You're a power user of cross connect. You have all your PNIs, your paid peering, settlement-free peering, IX, transit, and all that. You have redundant setup. You have all the cross-connect, hundreds of cross-connect coming in from your customers, right? You're being successful, and all of a sudden, you have to pour out, you have to get out, and there's no legal recourse. So that was a thing. That was the moment that it really opened our eyes up. We learned a tremendous lesson that here in this United States, I love, for its good and downside, I love this country, right? Don't get me wrong.
And you have perspective, right? You're not from the U.S. originally, right?
Right, but you got a different perspective that at some point you're like, we're in a free country, we're a nation of laws. How is this legal? How does one business unit decide that I'm going to destroy you, and instead of making an offer to buy you, I just want to put you out of business. I'm just going to steal all your customers. Like, how is this even legal? How's that possible? And then, so we had a lot of interactions with our legal folks, with lawyers and all that, and they there's only so much lawyers can do, but they do give you some good guidance in terms of how they look at it from their practice, right?
Sure.
And one of the things that we really learned in United States, and I think it's like that in a lot of places, is when we call someone landlord, the lord matters.
Okay. Wow.
So in that land, you are God. Okay.
That will make the show notes, definitely.
If you're in my house, and I want you out, sure, there are consumer regulations if you are a residential, tenant, right? The state has consumer protection and all that.
But doesn't apply
Commercial businesses do not get a lot of protection. So if I say you're out, I'm not renewing your rent. I'm the landlord. My house, my rules. Get out.
Yeah.
You're done.
Wow.
But what's fascinating too. So wait a minute. So here we are in the data center and internet infrastructure, right? A lot of data centers today market themselves as, we are the digital infrastructure of the world. We're the most critical piece of infrastructure that connects the entire world. We're very important. We're as important as the utilities and so on. Great for them. They're not lying. They're 100%. I 100% agree with them. So they're marketing how great they are and how important they are to society, and yet they could just on a whim decide to just pick winners and losers.
Sure.
Because last time this happened was in 1800s with railroads and the utilities, and that's how these industries all got regulated.
Right.
So
you're Wild West, even on the East Coast.
Right. So in the data center space, the cross connection, the interconnections right now is Wild West. And where there is really no regulation about that. So if a data center decides to compete with a customer and fight with a customer, that customer is in a very, very big trouble.
Sure.
And that's so that really opened our eyes up. So to go back,
you came back swinging.
We came back. Thank God we did. And what's that saying? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So now you're about to find out.
Okay.
I'm
ready.
So now that fast forward, we met some great people. This is where going back, relationships are everything, especially in the times of hard time. Everybody wants to make money, but people also want to see the underdog succeed, right? That's one of the things that really makes the entrepreneurial spirit of this country really great. And especially in Massachusetts, in Boston, one of the culture is that we love underdogs, right?
Okay.
It's been deep rooted in Boston culture. So
the Yankees aren't necessarily well appreciated here, I mean the baseball team.
That's correct. So there's that. But you do have a point. So what happened was there's a moment where there was this, we started getting ourselves more into dark fiber, where we started really, what ended up happening was, okay, so if we can't cross connect with customers and our partners and our providers above ground, then we're going to have to do it outside the building.
Sure.
And so this is the first time where we really sit down is we really need to figure out how to stop being a loser that just gets banged around by everyone, and we really need to start moving our critical backbone elements outside and be an actual telecom provider. Not because the existing telecom providers are bad. The reason why we never
the status. You needed the status.
The reason why we were never a dark fiber provider because all of our carrier partners ran fantastic fiber networks, right?
Sure.
Even today, these are some of the best people you can find in Boston, and we're a very satisfied customer. So we never felt the need, like we stayed in our lane. We ran a great IP network, we ran the IX and all that, but we never felt the reason for us to be in the fiber business. But now, for strategic survival, we found ourselves, we have to go outside, not because we want to compete with our dark fiber provider partners, but because we need to move our interconnection outside because we can't trust the data centers anymore.
Okay.
After what they've done to us, right? So
how long did that take? What was that process like?
Right. So this was a very interesting process. So this process started in 2019, and then, actually 2018 is when it started. So in 2019, we had our first fiber ring going for our own backbone. And then we were able to completely survive. And then that was 2019, end of 2019, beginning of 2020 is when all of this drama finally settled. We're like, the storm's now over. Now we have sunny days outside again.
Then you had another storm.
Yeah. Well, no more storms now. Thankfully, thank God. Not gonna. Well, so far, beginning of 2020, as the COVID started, terrible time for that. But that's the moment where everything stabilized. Now we have the ability to pretty much get to anywhere else. Our fiber network's up and running, and that really also, as nerds, every time these kind of things happen, it being an IP network, just a lit, networker, right?
Sure.
And putting yourself into a position where now you're outside in crew, contractor vans, fusion splicing with them, and seeing all this stuff happening that you've never faced before
Right.
outside, there's a lot of things that go through your brain, right? It's really fascinating how it's just like what you did a great intro where where a lot of us in the networking space were very fascinated about how, because we take things for granted.
For sure.
You plug in a cross connect, it just comes up. You plug in a fiber, it just comes up. Dark fiber, oh, it's just tube in the ground, it just works.
Right.
But seeing how the sausage is made,
that's a lot that goes into the sausage making.
Oh,
yeah.
So it was really fascinating. So in 2020, we said, okay, now that we survived, this can happen again. It's like the thing is that with data centers and real estate, there's a saying that the internet runs on real estate. And the reason why is you need space to put equipment. You can't really have routers running in the middle of the street, right?
The internet exists in time and space.
Yes,
right?
The internet exists in time and space, and the space are the landlords, right? So we run on real estate. And that part is Wild West. It's completely unregulated. This is going to happen again. It's like every time someone's rent this or one of our carriers rent this, we're going to get kicked out again. Like this can't happen. So it came down to essentially is we love IP networking so much. It's our dream. We just love the internet. No one's going to take this away from us. And when someone tried to take that away from us and said, go out of business, you will never run a network again, or you're just going to just go work for, I don't know, Google or whatever. Right. We're not going to accept that, right? So we're not going to let someone take our dream away from us.
Right.
So that is how we really dove head in and ended up finding ourselves. Fast forward to today, we've ended up finding ourselves become a utility company, not just fiber provider, right? So
Wait, do you mean that literally? Like
we mean that literally,
okay.
yeah.
So how are you a utility company, or you're regulated like a utility?
We are, yeah.
Okay.
So what happened is after we survived by running our fiber network, we said we need a bigger insurance. Just us surviving. Next thing, what's going to happen is these landlords are going to start kicking out our partner carriers, or they're going to start doing something else, right? As long as our partners, our biggest providers and vendors are relying on landlords, they too are at whim of getting kicked out. This could happen. This is going to be a repeating circle of insanity.
Sure.
Right? It's like we have to break the cycle, right? So how do we do that? And then we finally figured it out. Well, one of the things that really fascinated was, so I've always been neutral about cross connection. A lot of us in networking space, we always complain about cross connect costs, and I understand why. And as a small business owner, right? Cross connect costs add up real quick. These days cross connection costs more than the dark fiber nowadays, right?
Sure.
It's pretty expensive. But at the same time, when you truly appreciate how the internet works, all the stuff that goes in there, cross connect is a simple thing. It's just a pair of fiber that it's very profitable for the data center.
Right.
But what it also represents is the ecosystem, right? The relationship building, the customers, the investment they've made in the entire platform of their building. So there is a value in cross connect. So I've always kind of viewed that neutrally over time. But to be fair to the people that do complain about it, though, as we livened our fiber ring, now we become a full-blown dark fiber company. One thing that really fascinated me differently was, oh my God, we're saving so much money on cross connect. This is great because we're doing our cross connect out in the street, out in the manholes. I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. So, but then it also a light bulb went in our head. So thus far, all the us getting kicked out and our carriers, being threatened and things like that. This happens because us in the industry, the telecom industry, has made itself vulnerable by relying on real estate, because we're always seeing each other as competitors, right?
Sure.
So we couldn't work with each other, right? So what happened was we got ourselves into real estate owners and because we felt that they were neutral, and they were, because the real estate owners didn't sell the internet. They don't do telecom, right? They're just landlords. So they don't have a skin in our business. So they were naturally the natural neutral party for us to build our networks to and cross-connect and interconnect, do all of that. But now we live in a space where a lot of these landlords are now becoming their own network providers.
Right.
So eventually, at first, it started by having discriminated cross-connect rates. Like if you buy the landlord's own internet or telecom service, you don't pay cross-connect. That's like $500 a month. But if you buy one of the carriers, then so it started with which they can do whatever they want, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But then for us and for our partner carriers, when we are being threatened and when we're being kicked out, that's disruptive, right? So what really occurred to us was, okay, so we've become vulnerable. Now it's not even just a space and power for it. Network equipment does not generate that much power, right? If you worst case scenario, if you really wanted to jury rig it, just find space, do your own DC plant, right? You can make that work.
Yeah.
Carriers do that all the time. That's how it's
Sure.
a central office mentality, right?
Sure.
So we're not like enterprises or cloud or AI that draws a lot of power. So while we value the protected power environment of data centers, because we're such a small network provider, such small footprint users, we can do it ourselves if it had to.
Okay.
But what really made us get vulnerable is the cross connection. We have to interconnect with our customers, with our vendors. So when we started doing the manholes, it all of a sudden, what used to be our most vulnerable Achilles heel, just because we're fixed to that building, now we became mobile.
Yeah,
now
totally remove that from the equation.
Now we've taken the most important mode, the most important power advantage that landlords have, we took that away from them. Now, to us, I would love to work it like the data center that we're sitting in are fantastic partners. They run top-notch operation, great team. We have great relationship with them. That's why we're here, because we always. But we don't necessarily have to be in data centers anymore. Our network head-end could be any commercial office. We could build our own DC plan if we had to. Obviously, we'd prefer to work with data center. We like to stay in our lane, right?
Right.
But the point is, even with data centers, now data centers know too. Just in this place that we're sitting at, the building next door is another data center, right? So so now you have this competitive ecosystem where we don't necessarily the core of where we make the interconnections is no longer fixed to an address, right? So now it's mobile.
Yeah.
So if someone threatens us, just pull the cable, go move it to that building, and whatever.
Move the
cross connection outside.
Sure.
Right? So that's just what we've said is in late. Throughout 2020, as we're going through that, we said, okay, we've seen all of this. Now to really make the difference is, taking our experience and our story, now let's democratize it, let's product it, let's package it, let's weaponize it, and let's throw it to the wild. Because I will tell you right now and everyone, I'll make it my life's mission that no landlord of anyone is ever going to screw an internet business ever again.
You don't ever want to be beholden to that kind of
not
relationship
only am I,
again.
not just for myself, I don't want to see anyone else get hurt by a realtor ever again for the rest of our career. And at the very least, in the markets that I operate, not happening. So Boston, I love Boston. I grew up here. It's my home.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
I don't want to say that ever happened in Boston ever again. So that's where, so far, the most construction we ever did was we had great consultants, great engineers working for us, and they have helped us a lot. So the biggest conduit system we had was just for our fiber network, right? 4-inch conduits, and then you had to do what's called a joint trench. That's the cities do there's a regulation within the city to prevent the streets from getting too crowded. So you go through the process, you get your conduit chain, you have some small manholes to put your splice case in here and there. So it was very typical fiber build, right? It was very fascinating. We love every minute of it. But now,
and it's even more complicated than that, right? Because you have a municipality of Boston, but you also deal with Somerville, Cambridge.
Yep, everyone has their own different rules, right? So from that point, for when it was just for our fiber network, we could easily work in the existing municipal regulations and their assumptions of how utilities construction is typically done, right? But now we're trying to democratize, weaponize, and release it to the wild, then suddenly this small 3x3 handholds and 1 or 2 conduits is not going to be enough, because now we find ourselves in a situation where it was really strange talking with all our fiber providers and our partners. Everyone's like, well, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to help your competitors? And I tell them, listen, we're not trying to build a fiber network here. We found ourselves in a situation where we actually need our competitors, our friends, our enemies, even people that absolutely hate our guts to actually come into our manholes, so they can cross-connect with me and everybody else. So it really, now we're no longer in the fiber business. Now we're in the raw space, and it's a tunnel right-of-way business. Now we are in this utility space. So now this is completely something else. Right. So we had to, first and foremost, we had to find a place that would host this idea, right? This is going to be a massive disruption we are causing to the public street.
Right.
It's a big dick, right? So Right from the get-go, City of Boston was initially not a good candidate. Nothing against the City of Boston is a fantastic partner. They love what we're doing. We love them. But the challenge with City, as you would imagine, there's a lot of old infrastructure. There's a lot of congestion.
If you know 93,
the subway
was a cow path, and now it's an interstate.
Exactly,
right?
and a lot of subways like the red line, the green line, they have such little. Even the water main is so shallow because when you start digging up those streets, you're not digging up soil. You're digging up the ceiling of the subway. Like you have literally no space. So it's really what we needed was we need a concept, kind of a mini version of Manhattan versus New Jersey. If you look at the New York market, right? Manhattan has this great carrier hotels, fantastic assets, right? But then you also have, if you really want a heavy infrastructure in the data center, everybody goes to New Jersey because of it being slightly suburban. It's not suburban. It's New York.
Well, after 9/11, they moved a lot on the other side of the river. Yeah.
But part of that is also because it's industrial district, building new infrastructure is generally a lot easier. Right? So in Boston, looking at the concept, Cambridge was a potentially good location, but then we also saw. We like Somerville, this location where there's a place called Innerbelt. And what was unique about Innerbelt was Innerbelt really shined in the dot-com era. And
is this like your Ashburn? Is that a fair analogy?
On a very small, maybe 1/1000.
Sorry, I'm from Virginia, right?
Yes,
so Ashburn.
But you are correct. So it's kind of like so I generally tell people it's like a mini version of New Jersey versus Manhattan, right? So you're right next to downtown. So for intended purposes, you are downtown. But it's industrial, right? It's easier. So in 2000, when 360 Networks back then, which became Hibernia, when they built the subsea cable from Lynn, Massachusetts to Halifax and then out to Ireland. 360 also built a fantastic terrestrial route that connected their cable landing station. And if you look at the shoreline of Boston, Lynn makes a lot of sense. You can't bring a cable to Boston. There are some things that get in the way.
Wow.
So you got to bring it to Lynn, right? So they built this terrestrial front haul route from the Lynn landing station to the downtown ecosystem through the MBTA, the commuter rail right of way. So you can't get any more direct than the commuter rail. It's very direct, right? So it's like 15 kilometers from there, and it comes into Innerbelt where we're sitting in today because we're right next to railroad tracks. So, and then. As we're looking at this, the data there, this location has 2 data centers, which also is important for us because, we don't want to just do work for one data center, making a significant investment in upgrading utilities, because that one data center, if we ever had a falling out with them, it's a naturally contentious relationship, and we don't, we'd rather prefer that we have more than one data center that we can kind of bank on, right? To create a little bit of the ecosystem, the competitive spirit, if you will, for our customers and for the good of the market. So Somerville started looking very attractive for us. It's industrial area. There are 2 data centers clumped together, and then there's a subsea cable, the terrestrial route coming from the landing station.
Those 3 things lined up.
Yep. And you're surrounded by, being surrounded by railroad is a curse and a blessing at the same time. It's a curse because you want to build a new route out of that. You're going to get railroaded. It's not easy to cross railroad. So there's a curse. But it's a blessing that the long hauls are, it's so much easier to get the long hauls because
that's
right
how
next
Sprint,
door.
Like Sprint's famous for all their long haul was around CSX.
Exactly. So if you're in the long haul business, despite all the complexities and the bureaucratic BS that you have with railroads, it bitch having to deal with gazillion different towns all over the way, right? So it's a blessing and a curse. But for what we're trying to do for the global internet traffic, railroad is actually a friendly thing, believe it or not, right? So as we built this, we first started approaching City of Somerville, where we are. As Somerville has been a fantastic partner. They've been. They got it. As a matter of fact, Somerville's interesting is that Somerville was the first city in Massachusetts where they had competition in cable. The broadband, I think was like 97 or so. So you had RCN, I think there was another. I think it was Media One was the other at the time, this was the first municipality where you had choice of two cable providers back then.
Sure.
So Somerville was always unique in that they were always a kind of like a outlier they're not afraid of innovating for taking risks. So Somerville DPW, when they looked at our initial proposal, obviously their first reaction is like, "What the hell are you guys doing?" Right? And I don't blame them because we're proposing a substantial amount of disruption, and I don't blame them.
Sure.
If I were the municipality, I'd be like, I would have freaked out, right? So, but we continued the conversations over time, right? And they understood what we're doing. They saw what we're doing as like a major joint trench or the dig once, right? Where from a city size, even though they are not internet or network engineers, they don't see the network like the way you and I do, right? But they also understand the basics, and they're also good civil engineers. They know how to manage it right away, right? So from city size, one thing that cities absolutely hate is that why is it that here's the thing: cities, like, if you're in TPW, if you're a civil engineer, naturally you're gonna love monopolies, and I'll tell you why. Okay. If you have a problem with water main, the city runs water main. Okay?
One place to go. One
guy to go, call the water department.
Sure.
If the electric duct bank blows, call the power company.
Yep.
If there's a gas problem, call the gas company. But somehow with telecom, you call Verizon, and Verizon, oh, that's not my manhole. And then why is it that with telecom, there's 15, 20 gazillion different companies all proposing to dig the stretch, to tear off the stretch, and every time someone puts their pipe in, you keep losing space. The road's only 50 feet wide, and by the time you're done, it's like the road is complete. It's a total disaster with telecom.
Wow.
So from city's perspective, if you ask Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, or even any random
that's got to be real pain for them.
Oh, it's real pain. Yeah. It's real pain. They're like, what the hell? And they hate the fact that these telecom guys are all competing and they just can't work. They can't play nice. Everyone's, oh, you're not allowed in my county. We don't sell. So it's like, so cities are left holding the bag because us telecom providers are so dysfunctional. We always fight with each other that the cities are end up having to deal with the fact that the road keeps getting torn up all the time.
Right.
Because everybody just can't. So like Boston got fed up with it. Cambridge got fed up with it. Even Somerville got fed up with it. They're like, okay, everybody that do build now you got to do what's called joint trench. So when one telecom provider says, I'm going to put my line in there, my pipe in there, now you got to do a public notice, right? Mm-hmm. You got to get notice out. You got to take out advertisement. You notify all of the interest telecom providers and say.
And anybody who wants to put fiber in,
you got to invite them to join into a construction. So they too can get a pipe in. So, but the challenge with this joint trench is that, in Boston, joint trench also became a natural racket, which is kind of hilarious. So the way the telecom providers reacted to the joint trench rule to take advantage of it is to create the little middle school or middle school sophomore club, if you will, like a old school boy club, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is these telecom providers, when they do the joint trench, they send the invitation, and the reality is, if you're a new provider, you get a joint trench letter, right, inviting you to construction. Now you have to take a look at this because if you don't have a customer or if you don't have a network plan in that particular area at the time, why spend $75,000 or $150,000 to jump, to share the construction cost? That's a lot of capital.
Yeah.
So most likely, if you're a new ISP or even if you're an existing ISP, unless you have a customer or some kind of project going at the time, a lot of providers opt out of the joint trench because they just can't afford the capex right now, right? So there's some providers jump in, but a lot of providers also don't jump in.
Right.
So then after construction is done, streets repaved, when that other provider now needs fiber, the existing providers that were part of the joint trench are not going to let them in. Right, so now we're back to square zero again. Now the new providers are being locked out of the stretch again. So then what happened was these existing members of Joint Trench run this little racket clubs where, oh, you scratch my back, I know you, you know me, buy me a beer. Oh, here. There's a running joke. It's called a 40% to 80% legit conduit licenses, right? Where there is no license, there's no title. It's like, oh, I know it. Yeah, here, just pull the cable. Yeah. Tell this guy that you know me. Like so that's kind of how like a lot of people started running fibers around here. But if you're not in the know, you're not. If you're a new kid on the block and you're not one of them, no, you're never getting in, right? So that's kind of what's been going on. Now, for when we started this project to bring the cross-connect ecosystem out to stretch, we couldn't work with the existing joint trench model. And Somerville was a great partner for this because what we wanted to propose is, not only do we're going to do the joint trench and involve the carriers jump in, we're also going to put in future capacity. We're going to own those capacity. We're going to be a regulated utility under the Massachusetts Department of Telecom and Cable, where we're going to have the published, under the tariff doctrine. the publish attachment reg. So we're subject to the same pole and conduit attachment regulations as the power company and Verizon, right? So the value is once this system is put in, anyone who did not participate in the joint tranche can easily put their cable in because all of the conduits that we own and operate are openly leased out to everyone for the duration, for the life cycle of the entire system. And the city loved that, right?
Sure.
They're like, oh my, this is a joint tranche that is finally well run without the dysfunction, right?
Sure.
And so from a regulatory perspective, I think that we were very lucky and blessed to have found a fantastic municipal partner, right? Where they were really smart. They understand the challenges of managing the right of way from a telecom perspective, and they really welcome this kind of idea, right? So it was a great partnership to work with them, and over time, as we started this construction, it was a lot of capital, right? Very, very expensive, and,
Sure.
and we'll get to some of that. But the value is fast forward to today. Now that the system's up and running, because it's an open access system, right? We have a situation where not only the existing telecom, not only the old school boy club guys are freely running their fiber in our system, you also have non-traditional fiber. You even have like international networks that are applying,
Sure.
that are becoming like everyone and their grandmother's becoming a dark fiber provider now in Boston. It's hilarious. It's almost like Boston has gone from one of the most awkward cities for internet infrastructure, and it's now turning into like the network engineers almost like wet dream, if you will, where like the becoming a dark fiber provider has become so accessible.
Interesting.
Because Massachusetts, believe it or not, Massachusetts from a regulated perspective, becoming a CLAC, becoming a CLAC license to have the ability, authority, if you will, to own and run your own fiber cable in the ground. Massachusetts is one of the most telecom friendly states in terms of regulations.
You made that comment to me back at ITW
Yes.
in May 2025, and it's
Yes.
like I wasn't sure about that,
Yeah.
but you've clearly explained it.
Yeah.
Are there any other metros in the U.S. that are coming close to?
I think a lot of them are like North Carolina is another state that's fairly open. That's another one out there. Florida is interesting. They're also pretty fairly easy to work with. Some other states are a little difficult. Like Texas has some challenges.
That's
there.
interesting
Yeah,
and surprising, actually.
That is surprising. You would think that, but yeah, in Texas, there's a bit of a right-of-way compensation that you have to do.
Okay.
From what I understand, I'm not 100%. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but
Yeah, sure.
it's not. It's surprising. We found it surprising that Massachusetts is easier. New York's challenging. New York depends on location. New York is New York, right?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
New Jersey is not too bad, right? From a regulated perspective. But what happens is the regulation might make a lot of sense from a regulated perspective, and that's good for them, right?
Sure.
But a lot of the challenge that we see in broadband infrastructure is not so much the regulations per se. It does matter. I'm not ignoring that. It does matter.
Clearly, from everything you've said today,
Right.
it does matter.
It does matter, but what I mean by that is before the regulator even becomes your number one problem to deal with. The number one problem is making a business sense, a lack of capital versus making a return.
Sure.
Right. So becoming a CLAC is so easy in Massachusetts. Well, then why do we have such dark fiber? Why was it so difficult to find dark fiber? Because there's no competition out there, right? And the reason for that is in Boston. Sure, becoming a CLAC is easy. Yeah, you got your CLAC license, but now you need conduit. You need you need access to conduit, and everyone has this old school racket club going on that's blocking out. So then, you're a CLAC. Congratulations. Guess what? You're not coming to my conduit. Like,
You still don't have access.
Right. You're still blocked out. Not because of that's not the fault of the state or the regulators from a state law perspective, but there are some deficiencies in terms of how the conduits are regulated on the municipal levels, maybe. But I think before we even put that on the municipalities, I think it's really the first fault lies in the telecom providers that are naturally against competition, right? And when it's a natural, and it's not like they were deliberately doing this either. These are all good-minded people. Like they're not trying to deliberately create.
It's the way an ecosystem emerged.
It's an ecosystem emerged. It was a natural inefficiency. Some people started using that as a loophole. Some people didn't. But as it happened to the way it was,
Sure.
Then as all of us started seeing this problem, it already became, yeah, it's not great, but you know what? Maybe it's a feature, not a bug. Let's just leave it alone.
Sure.
So that's kind of how it transpired. And what we've built is, because it's an open access system, it's really shattering that whole model,
Right.
right? And so so it's interesting how we started from being networkers and fast forward to today, and now we're utility.
Well, let's use that, and we do need to start to wind this down. But
Yeah.
Again, from my early interaction with you and thinking about, well, all the challenges are actually in building out the physical infrastructure.
Yeah.
You've added a dimension, like over the time I've gotten to know you, like the business and the regulatory pieces are at least as important,
Absolutely.
and maybe more complex than actually what it means to build conduit, trench for it, and put fiber through it. Those problems seem pretty easily solved compared to having to go out and go from being, what did you say, introverted and
to extroverted or opening yourself up. Yeah.
And you've laid out a path of, you had to learn to work with the carriers and sell your vision and what you're trying to do with them. You needed to work with regulators and city officials to say, we need to change the system. And for those capital intensive projects, you probably also needed to work with investors or however else you raise capital to do this stuff.
Right.
So what did I miss? What else is big there? What would you tell people who are where you started? I understand how peering works, or I support access networks. If people wanted to get into what you're doing, what are like 2 or 3 things? What wisdom could you drop on them to say these are things you need to start learning about?
One thing, to be honest with you, I'm not sure if I'm the right guy to be giving wisdom to others, but I will tell you this much. I'll tell you my experience.
Your perspective, your experience. That's all you can speak to. That's right.
All I can speak to is we are very tenacious, and we're very, I don't think stubborn is the right word, because we're very flexible, but we're also very, we have our, we started this company because we love TCP IP, not just networking.
Sure.
Just IP is, when you look at IP, and I think that, when you talk to Vin Cerf, he will probably tell you a little bit similar theme, I think. I would love to chat with him someday. But when you look at the history of IP represents freedom. We're breaking away from the old circuit-based, telco mentality. It's freedom to whatever you want, right? That's truly, and if you really look at the societal and historical nature of what internet really is, and what telecom and communications really is, you start to realize why USPS was owned by the government from the days of George Washington.
Sure.
Communications, information wants to be free. So, not to get too sidetracked, I've been a very huge fan of IP, and it's my dream, it's my baby. I'm not a large company. We run a great network. We have fantastic customers. They love us. But it represents what I love getting up to work every day and doing. And when someone told me, I'm going to take it away from you, that was so traumatic. And I said, no one's going to take that away from us. So, and very tenacious. As you can see the story has spent many, many years.
Sure.
Right? So we never gave up. We were very persistent in our vision, in keeping our dream, and we would always get beat down as a small company, but we always got up.
Right.
And we never gave up.
Definition of tenacity, right there.
We're very tenacious. We're like that angry people that's biting something, just never letting go. We just never let go. So now that, to what you were mentioning earlier, what happened in the span of past 10 years, we've come out into a completely different person.
Yeah. You've had to learn so much about so many different facets of this.
Yes, out of this, all because, to me, I can tell you right now, the most number one killer app on the internet is Traceroute. I'm sorry, it just is what it is. Okay.
You might be the only person standing behind that assertion, but anyway.
You're not wrong. But the point is, okay, listen, we love IP networking.
Sure.
Okay. And when and the reality is, we've seen Boston's a unique and very difficult market in telecom. It used to be. I think things are getting a lot better now. It's a vicious market, as you've seen, right? But So really, Boston has really changed us in ways that we never thought we would. It's going through all this experience, and we've survived, and now we're a strong player in this space. And everyone that we've been through, even our enemies, even the folks that kicked us out, I can tell you, I appreciate every one of them because look at where we are today. They've made us better. So we survived. Now, now you got even subsea cable guys coming into the manholes doing their own thing. You got CDNs having splice. I mean, can you imagine some hosting shop playing dark fiber? I mean, who would have thought that doesn't even make any sense, right? So it's crazy how Boston has gone from one of the most, this old school boy club, racket club, kind of closed telecom society to it's just completely open, right?
Yeah.
It's quite interesting.
I'm not sure we have a better place to stop the episode. So that's an awesome wrap. I do have one fun question that I ask everybody on the podcast. What's the worst outage you've ever caused? You have some multiple facets of experience here. So you're doing this long enough, you've caused an outage, right?
There are two outages that I can remember that will be the worst of my career. The first is back in the old days when I was a kid, right? The same outage that everyone runs into, we all get, classic iOS made all of us better.
Sure.
Right? Where one typo brings down the whole network. Everyone's been through that. I had that moment happen to me over an ACL. Right, the classic. So
it's a story. It's
a story for everyone, but you learn very quickly not to do that ever again.
Exactly.
And that's why a lot of us in old school network, including myself, we're all Juniper fans. Well, we started with Juniper because when Juniper came in, they introduced the concept of commit. So that was really
commit and rollback.
Save
your bacon so many times.
It is. Let me tell you, it's just that one feature. It made the internet a lot more reliable. What they did.
That was the one selling point. The first, I had a friend who went early to Juniper as a resident engineer at UUNet, who said, "We have rollback. You need to come take a look at this."
Absolutely. That one feature, I think, is one of the least talked about heroic features that made the internet more reliable.
Now it's everywhere.
Single-handedly.
Right? It's just a good idea.
Even Cisco, it's interesting. I grew my career out of Juniper. But TOWARDEX today, we're a Cisco shop. We're all ASR 9K, we've got 8,000 coming in, NCS, all that. So, and iOS XR, we're a big fan of that.
Yep.
It's got the Juniper-like features. Don't get me wrong, I'm always going to be a Juniper fan.
You've got options. You've got options. That's right.
To your point, now it's everywhere. You got Nokia, you got, even Arista's got this feature now, which is fantastic. So, so that's one thing. And then the other outage was when we started doing a lot of automations, right, with our own automation tools and all that. So automation is fantastic, right? When you're provisioning, that you're eliminating a lot of human error outages.
Sure.
So when we're doing provisioning, the system just goes and does it. No one's touching Sierra, and we still touch. We always touch Sierra, but we rarely have to do that to turn up a customer, right? Which is great. But oh boy, the scope of the outage just completely went 1,000 times, right? So now you have a situation where your scripts and your code, right? If you have that, then that's great. But you don't know the stuff that's going on the vendor side.
Right.
And you look at iOS XR or you look at the modern day Junos, you get one complaint that I have with these vendors and the networking community, my only complaint, I'm not a smart guy, I'm just saying as an end user, I gotta be honest with you. Yeah, iOS Classic and all that back in the old days was really unreliable in many ways, but I'll tell you, it was simple. And the monolithic stuff, when it ran, it just ran until you hit a bug, okay?
Sure.
That was that. Today, things have gotten a lot more reliable in many things by deepening the distributed nature of it.
Sure.
But I gotta be honest, now we're doing VMs and we're doing all this stupid crap on the routers. And you know what's happening? There's 15,000 different software running on a router. No one even knows where the bugs are anymore.
It's more complex, for sure.
You got a full-blown ecosystem. It's like you're running a cloud provider on your routing engines, but by the time you're done, even the vendor doesn't even know what's going wrong anymore. So automation running a simple thing like configure and bring up an EVPN. Customer suddenly just bombs out the entire line card. Oh, we never saw that happening. So now when you have an automation, we had that happen at one point. So now we should that really leaves a mark, just like that ACL thing that everyone used to have with the classic iOS, right? So now we've gotten to a point where now it's even with automation, we're any change now that every time we do network design, one of the design principles that always comes to meetings it's more than just about redundancy and physical hardware. All that diversity, it's now one of the metrics that we always discuss is what's called a failure domain.
Right.
So we also have to diversify not only for physical and hardware standpoint, but also by the use case.
Yeah.
Because if there's an outage, we want to make sure that we limit the scope of that blast, right?
Right.
So if there's a L2 VPN or converged metro EPL customer that you're working on, we probably don't want outage related to that affecting IP transit customers. So what ended up happening is now we're going back to having all kinds of routers everywhere now because we wanted to limit the failure domain.
Right. So I have this idea for an episode or set of episodes on design for operations and design for simplicity. Right. So you'll be back. Maybe we'll do a roundtable for that. We'll get some other operators on for that.
I would love that.
I'm signing you up right now.
Appreciate it.
James, this has been awesome. Before we break, where can people find you? Like, are you out there writing? Is there material online where you want to point people to?
Yeah, right now the easiest to find me is on LinkedIn. I am planning on, obviously, I get asked a number of things, to share our experiences and know how, just share our stories. So, right now I've been just seldomly from time to time I've been using LinkedIn articles. The articles have not been very great. You don't get a lot of viewing exposure versus simple posts. So I might do a separate blog. I haven't really thought of it yet, but in the interim, people can find me easily on LinkedIn.
And that's how this all started. I saw your posting and got really interested in what you were doing on LinkedIn. So I'll say +1 to that. Awesome. James, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening in on yet another conversation on Total Network Operations today. We appreciate your time. We'd love your feedback. If you've got something to say about NetOps or you want to hear what's coming, contact me via DM on LinkedIn or send us a follow-up at packetpushers.net/follow-up. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Total Network Operations.